Heads up. Even though it is the water that teaches the lessons curious fish wish to learn, the water yet speaks to each fish through the medium also of other fish. And each fish must then remember that what he hears from the mouths of other fish are but fragments of the totality of what the water is saying. One legend holds that not long after Adam got to thinking, God noticed him starting to do a certain thing and said to him, "Why the hell are you so intrigued with your mind? I don't see you showing the same kind of interest in your lungs or liver." And Adam, being totally unprepared for such an inquiry, hemmed and hawed for a second, then began shouting and pointing about. "It was the snake. The snake made me do it." No, it was that woman. Yeah, she put me up to it. And of course, seeing man become defensive about what he was doing, the big guy understood that he had taken care of that little problem. As he drove from the garage, after receiving the mechanic's startlingly high estimate to find and stop a certain rattle in his car, a man thought, "It's surprising how quickly the irritation of a non-fatal noise diminishes once you learn the cost of its elimination." And as he made a left turn, he was struck by the parallel situation regarding man's routine state of awareness and the question of effecting changes therein. You knew something else was coming to that. Men conceived of the concepts of psychology, psychiatry, and neurology so they would have something they could study other than the mind itself directly. Or you can look at it like this. They invented such intellectual areas because of their fear of confronting it head on. Yeah, okay, I know, the matter of fairness. Another view of it entails the possibility of the improbability of men being able to do so, at least under conditions that most would find acceptable. After playing around with that certain kind of activity about long enough, he says, to drive himself crazy, one man says he'd now settle for just going ahead and living out his life, staring and in a daze, if he could just skip those moments of being aware of it. It's almost impossible to get reasonable people on the train to a different way of thinking without abundantly playing up to their simplistic desire to hear other people's present thinking thoroughly trashed. Sheep establish a religion distinct from the one embraced by cows so that the cows will have something exotically erroneous against which they can favorably compare theirs. Only unenlightened, terminally captive minds believe that there is a final way out of the finite labyrinth of commonplace thought. First man said, "The proof that no one knows what they're talking about is the fact that it doesn't make any difference." And the second man responded, "How does that prove that no one knows what they're talking about?" And the first man said, "Well, does it seem to make any difference?" And the second man had to admit that it didn't seem to. So, of course, the first man said, "See?" I don't guess I need to add that the second man, being normal and all, gained a severe head pain from this little repartee. Everything one man said, he'd note, was in quotation marks. Some legal news. Man's normal state of awareness is under what is supposed to be an exclusive contract to life. The juggler said to the ventriloquist, "The great thing about having an agent is that," and the dummy interrupted him, "Yeah, I know, is that you don't have to think for yourself." And a hoofer walking past him suddenly tripped over his attention, which he had earlier let slip, and dropped to the floor. And the cry went out, "Curtain time, people. Get your act together. It's curtain time." A little too fast? Prefer I hadn't read it at all, eh? And from the world of bricklaying comes this definition: arguing, the mortar of ordinary mental structures. And while we're on the subject of agriculture, there's a curious story from another galaxy that says on one of its planets the creatures can't come up with the sum 4, using only 1, 2. Seems to have something to do with their unique laws of mechanics. After some time spent in careful study of the matter, one man began to think of himself as being trapped inside of a building which was continually filled with smoke, but which conditions did not preclude him living a perfectly normal life, at least as normal as everyone else, but only as long as he wasn't aware of the smoky conditions. Upon hearing about this, one man's duodenum and colon looked at one another, shaking their heads in disbelief as they thought, "Thank God we don't have to put up with that kind of shit." Here's yet another way of eyeballing it. It's no big deal being stupid as long as you never take a test. One man awoke one morning to find a university busily operating in his head, and after a quick survey of the scene said to himself, "Wow, let's go find the girls' dorm." If there is a moral to this story, it must be pertinent to how difficult it is to be moral immediately upon awakening. From bedtime sleep, that is. This means I got to slow them all down, right? Everyone, save the few, is in perfect agreement with life. Oh yes, including those who rant and rail against it. They too are in perfect agreement with the old dear. The only ones not, the few I mentioned, are never noticed for the simple reason that they never comment on the matter. Local conditions in the showers in one corner of the universe, still phoning for approval from life, said to it, while nodding toward man, "I'll hold him down if you want to do him again." On the religious front comes a report that on one world, in place of the platitude, "God loves a cheerful giver," they have a version that goes, "The powers that be find their most glee with those who will grab their own ankles." Of course, you want first-class lessons in theatrics. Just try turning to life and bringing up such matters and watch it use the whole universe to innocently reply, "Who? Me?" Which is all, of course, your own little runny imagination. Okay, bend over and grab them, troops. Just think people still mistake this for some sort of religious program at times. It's either surprising or gives you hope. I don't know which. Somewhere between Paris and Istanbul, many people step off the train at an unmarked station, whereat they wonder whether they now know the secret or not. It is indeed a curious little place. Not far, I'm told, from the Danube's final eastern swing. The speaker so addressed the crowd: "Habit holds the universe together. Also man's mind. Damn it." Some in the audience smiled and cheered. Some appeared angry, but most just looked puzzled. What did he say? Okay, all you medical nuts, here's how it is. Psychological illnesses are all your imagination, same way that all psychological health is. And of course, this is absolutely not true unless you understand that it is. Our attorneys made us add that. In one solar system, life one day boomed out, "Stand and be counted." And the first man to stand shouted out, 6,000,001," and life almost burst the gut laughing. though no one was sure at what. Okay, look through here. If, let us say, a man's normal state of awareness runs at 40 miles an hour, then who is to say that it cannot go faster? And as far as who is to say that it cannot go slower, why, everyone. That's who. All 6 billion of them. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot that the story is about another part of the galaxy. Never mind. The most fun that most people have who ever get involved with this sort of thing is in the beginning, when they have free rein and the energy to dream, think, and talk about it all they want to. Attention. Most people who ever get involved in this sort of thing are still at the beginning. And a viewer stares intently at his TV and wonders, then how come I ain't having more fun than I am? Immediately after men dreamed up the idea of gods, they dreamed up stories of the gods getting really angry at men. Know why? It's so to distract them from looking at how they feel about themselves. And a boy mused, I always found it interesting how men both cherish mirrors and yet find one of their conditions to be bad luck. One man's private motto was, no response to mental conflict is better than any response. He decided to keep this to himself after causing his brother's ears to bleed when he initially revealed it to another. Another way to determine if you're making any extraordinary efforts or not is to ask yourself if you believe that the pressures and problems you experience in life originate in external circumstances. A thin, sharp, elusive line that divides the few from the many, and yet one that is broad, blunt, and obvious. Today's tip for the spiritually starved. Other than eternal life, man has but one hope. Live the present one in the natural days into which you were born. Now shut up and run with it. That's all you'll ever need. Even though something you can think about may be important, even survival necessary, once you begin thinking about it, it also becomes just a hobby. One man's personal decision. I will only speak of yesterday when yesterday comes back around. All of man's mental structures are both real and imaginary. They are real as long as you don't look at them too closely. And a boy thought, I always wondered why so much of mankind needs glasses. Those who do not understand life are those who will look upon mortal existence and cry over man's plight. And a boy thought, it's always struck me curious that sympathy and stupidity start with the same letter. Without intending to, one man got a mouse trapped in his head that could not find a way out. Okay, said the guy, here's the deal. You let us put this siding on your house and we'll throw in free the information that living up to your eyeballs in swamp water is not the problem, not so long as you never raise up on your tippy toes and look around from a different view. Plus, it's guaranteed for the life of somebody. In case you haven't thought about it in a while, a reminder. One nice thing about becoming irretrievably engaged in activities such as this is that it simplifies your inner life mucho considerably, in that you end up with just one personal problem. Just one. After years of wanting to, one man finally went to another planet. But once there, discovered he had nothing to write home and complain about. He ended up sorry that he'd come. For your information, this story is basically fiction. made up of bits and pieces from psychology, religion, science, and the mystical, along with a generous topping from the study of dreams, known in some quarters as life on earth, ... 2 bits. One man saw an ad wherein life was seeking someone to write fables and allegories about it. But when the man applied for the position, life insisted that it had placed no such ad. The guy forthwith canceled his subscription to his daily paper. Well, he wanted to, but didn't know who to contact. Well, other than life, and he just got through dancing to that dizzying little ditty. Okay, I'll explain it for you. Everybody already works for life, and the only ones who don't are those who discover that they do. Did. Well, you know what I mean. And now over to our literary desk. Once upon a time, life appeared to a man in the guise of a flock of ravens. And the man said, "Give me a break. I already danced to that tune." Which caught life so off guard that it shit all over the man's new sport coat. And the viewer looks deeply into his TV set and says, "I either don't get this stuff or else I don't want to. And in either case, I'm going to have myself a beer and momentary relapse." A great example of the power of collective thinking is the belief that activities such as this must be spiritual, because everyone says it must. Yes. Well, you know what I mean. One man used to run. One man used to run ahead of himself. One man used to run behind himself. And one man used to run alongside himself. Everyone runs inside of themselves, though no one in their right mind will admit it. Or maybe that can see it, like and realize it. Maybe not admit it, if you see what I mean. There is a difference. If there is a difference. One man used to run, and he'd run alongside himself. One day, life tapped a man on the shoulder and said, "Excuse me," and when the man turned, and life suddenly realized what it had done, it said, "Oh, excuse me," twice, and left. It in a shutnell. If you're not conscious of being conscious, you're not conscious. After the hired expert discovered, clandestinely planted in man in an area not generally scrutinized, a quietness detector, much became clear and many were relieved. Verse 2. Only incompleted objects have the interest to preach or to be preached to. And one man said to himself, shut up, and thought, well, it's about time. Anytime he'd respond to a direct question, this one man would add, speaking allegorically. Someone said to a mystic who spoke publicly on matters such as this, "It's strange to hear you talk about the things that I should be doing." And the mystic mused, "You think it's strange hearing me do it." One man studied the many structures and institutions of which man has conceived that constitute his civilized world to such a degree that their distinctions began to blur and they began to merge into a single whole. And he began to feel dizzy, disoriented, as though he might pass out, and suddenly yelled, "Mein Gott, I'm in Istanbul." Out of all of the available public literature on the matter of another state of consciousness, of awakening, liberation of the mind, etc., might I direct your attention to the fact, not noticed, nor is it intended, nor should it be noticed, and people are not responsible for the lack of notice. But from a view of those that should have a practical interest in such matters, there is a continual blurring of two areas: the area of knowledge and the area of some, well, let's just call it experience, as opposed to knowledge. Now, you can take all the literature, or you can find contemporaneous commentators on the matter, speculators, people who have an academic background or an interest in the metaphysical, the area of comparative religions. When I say the metaphysical, I don't mean in to the extent that the ordinary would find it cuckoo land. People who have an interest in the possibilities, there is some psychological basis for the idea of satori, of another state of consciousness, of some kind of awakening. Those who now find or suspect that there is a valid, and in fact ultimately psychologically based, explainable reality to what has heretofore been considered to be metaphysical, extremely unusual ideas, and sometimes taken metaphorically as, let's just use the awakening, what Buddha described. Somewhere within this broad range, as many of you may know, even there are psychologists, not just people in the areas of religion they're actual people, professionals in the field of psychology, that now believe that there should be some closer notice and study given to the idea of an awakened state, an enlightened state, that they believe now that for whatever reason, of course we know the reason life made them do it, but they say that they believe that there is now enough literary, historical background from enough reliable sources that the idea of an awakening cannot be just dismissed out of hand any longer as religious or spiritual daydreams or some form of neuroses. So that they begin to speculate on it. They begin to discuss it. They begin to try and compare all of the many fragments of apparent attempted descriptions, and we have not a dearth of them. 3,000 years ago, stretching from every corner of this planet, that there are descriptions of people that experienced something extraordinary inside of their brain. And they attempt to describe it. And it continues to linger about, and as I said, there is even now a growing body of literature in the West that is taken to be less than religious and less than merely metaphysically speculative, that is considered to be a fairly reliable, or is considered to be fairly reliably based on a bedrock of historical study, psychological consideration after the fact of all these descriptions of this state. But what I was getting at, there is a continual blurring, not only out there, but if you'll notice, as always, inside of your own brain. But out there makes it always easier to talk about, because it is, we all know this, is a lot more fun to talk about fat, ugly people, ugly than ourselves. Well, maybe I'm just speaking for me. Well, why else would God make other fat, ugly people? I didn't mean to get into the area of speculative theology, but I got a better one. Why the hell did God make us fat, ugly people and then mirrors on top of it? I mean, he could have let well enough alone. There's a blurring of, simply put, the area of knowledge and the area of experience. When those who have not, we'll assume, had, well, I won't say assume, those that are talking about in the way in which I'm saying have not had any sort of enlightening experience. But when they begin to discuss it, as close as that they may track the written records, and as you just have to go along with me putting it this way, I'm not going to stop and describe it all, as close as they may be on paper, verbally, to a reasonably psychological, quote, insight into what people have described as a state of enlightenment, some extraordinary state of consciousness. They always read into it, they always describe it as making one privy to some sort of extraordinary information. Now, they will give perhaps a passing honorarium, a notice to the experience, that they'll take historically that the Buddhas, in the small b sense, but they'll take the people that's left all these records, that they say, well, obviously they described it as some sort of experience, that they said that it was almost a blinding flash, or that they'd been up for 6 days, they hadn't eaten for 2 months, and they thought they were about to pass out, and suddenly it was like they got not a second wind, but like a 20-second new wind. And without passing out, without going unconscious, without it being some extraordinary blinding flash that took them out of the normal realm, it was as though something clicked, and that there was this experience. But then ordinary thinkers, commentators on it, that's as much attention as they can give to it. They simply repeat or on paper stroke their beards and go, well, they obviously had some sort of extraordinary experience. But be that as it may, that is, and they may say, well, who will know what it is? All experience is subjective, blah, blah, blah. But then they will start getting into what they have extrapolated from all the written records. Their attempted analyzation of what would be a part of this extraordinary experience. And that is when I say it begins to blur, because even though the mind has to face the fact that it is an experience, something happened, they then devote the rest of the time, they devote the rest of their attention, all the attempted explanations, all the attempted inquiries into what might be the nature of this, on the basis of knowledge. To even infer that the awakening reveals the truth of life. Let's put it that way. Then the truth of life, obviously, refers to a noun. I mean, it refers to a thing. Or for us to refer to knowing the secret, well, to know the secret is to know something. It is a knowledge. Could I hint to you that that's not true? It's not true on the basis that there is a separation between what people say they know, the sanest, middle of the road, the middle of life, normal people. There is a distinction between what people know and the experience of being alive that the mind cannot distinguish. I noticed that I received no mail or threatening faxes since the last time we taped, when, just sort of as a byproduct of the night's palavering commentary, when I happened to mention that beyond all the psychologists' interest in trying to formulate a stable, dependable schedule as to when children normally begin to speak and what are the kind of boundaries, minimally, maximally, that seem to reflect a normally developing child, etc., and that they can't seem to come up with any figure, or they can't seem to really narrow it down to a usable degree of variance between children. And I simply pointed out that a child speaks finally, or he speaks at the time that he now knows everything that he's going to know. Now, that's at the ordinary level. As I said, it was sort of surprising that we received no mail or anybody going, Jesus, I've heard some insane things, but that's world class. Thank you. Thank you. I'm not immune to flattery. I'm going to have to go ahead with that and tell you the truth. What people think of as intelligence, and remember this is even beyond, this is a wider scope from the ordinary view than education. But I'll clear that up if anyone's ears are not already severely bleeding. Education has nothing to do with what people know. In any sense beyond 2 and 2 is 4, and is Detroit north of Indianapolis or south? Beyond what would people normally think of as being hard knowledge, scientific, technological, geographical-based knowledge. Something having to do with the physical world. If the knowledge, the further it becomes removed from that world, then what I just told you is the truth. Education has nothing to do with intelligence. And it has nothing to do with knowledge. Put it back on the basis I was using tonight. And as a matter of fact, as insane as that may sound, the history of man is replete with notions, proverbs, maxioms that are very close to that. They keep being repeated. And yet if you stop someone and say, well, can you tell me exactly what that means? You just said it. I've heard it before, but what the hell does it mean? And like the quoting of all good cliches, or by the good quoting of all cliches, the man or woman would have no idea what. Life made them do it, but they don't know what to say. But the idea that education is something apart from what a man knows has long been at a non-verbal collective level suspected. Very close to canon. But remember, this is collective and non-verbally. I can't help bringing up one more time. Think about one of the great sales pitches for education. Or what should be. I've offered it to the world now several times over the last few years, and I've still yet to see it pop up on any PSAs on the radio or television or in the print media. But that not only is education, by golly, a good thing, it's not just a good thing to help your earning capacity throughout life, but education, they might as well stop speculating over it. Education, by golly, is just right on the money of improving, of expanding the degree of civility amongst humans. Proof being, there is less than 0.0% of men or women on death row in any state in this union who have a PhD. Yeah. There have never been a convicted murderer in this country, in the history of this great nation of Turkey, not one who was a graduate of TIT, MIT. Well, Turkey, I know. Maybe we should come back to the United States. Not one Harvard graduate has ever been on murderer's roll. There have been less, and in case you think that's too extreme, there are less than 0.7% of people in our prisons, or have ever been in our prisons, for any felony, forget murder, but for any felony, who had a PhD. So do you see, if we could get all of these petty criminals, the kinds of people who go out and hold up 7-Eleven stores, will shoot people on the street for the price of a stamp, and then we have to put them in prison, and whatever it costs, millions of dollars throughout their lifetime. But you ever notice how long prisoners live? If we could just take those people and put them in school and get them, just find they've got to have some area, economics, something ridiculous, but keep them in school and into postgraduate work, and the odds, they're right there on paper. The proof is there that there's, just constructively speaking, no chance we have eliminated any constructive possibility that that person will ever commit a felony. Everybody, I assume, understands that's not going to happen. Plus, people that heard it, if they took it seriously for a few minutes, even people with a Princeton degree would go, wait a minute, there was something in there somewhere, but halfway through you talking about it, you turned it inside out, and I was about to follow that, and then you took a left turn down a one-way street. And then yet you stop and smile like you reached the end of the sentence, because it almost made sense, except they think, you're going about it backwards some way. I'm not. No. So that's the explanation. No. an explanation. If it makes any sense, you cannot say it went in the wrong direction or it wouldn't have made any sense. In the mind, the people would walk away going, something's still wrong. Something is drastically wrong. And they can't, assuming I could jump out and show the numbers, just the ones I just more or less made up, but I'm sure it's close to reality, about the relationship between postgraduate degrees and the lack of felonious activity while in possession thereof. And they go, well, there's no doubt, because I got figures. I could show them figures that I got no interest in. We show them objective third-party figures, and they go, all right, you're right. And I say, so all we'd have to do, if we could get everyone in this country, constructively speaking, get them in graduate school, get them that far, we could then forget it because there's, constructively speaking again, as we say in the air conditioning trade, constructively speaking, there is no chance after that that they will ever engage in criminal activity. Well, at least felonious, anything beyond shoplifting or spitting on a rabbi or something. Does anybody understand, in the midst of all of that, that is connected to what I was saying, that there is a kind of suspicion, there is a kind of acceptance of the, although they don't know what it is, that education and what people know, the mind at first says, well, it obviously, not just sort of connected, it's like that. And it's not. Or else how? How would it be that a child only speaks, with whatever age, 2 or 3, but once he knows everything he's going to know, then he decides to speak? Now, of course, I'm sure some kind of graduate of the University of Southern California, somebody go, well, just because you said it didn't prove it, but I said it twice. That should be sufficient. This gets, of course, dangerously close to the kinds of things that life ask me not to be talking about so directly. At least you think you missed it all before I press on. Let me just simply point this. Let me give you a hint. I mean, this is a kind of real subtle hint. Well, if you consider dirt, if you consider the ground subtle, here's a subtle hint. No matter what they do throughout history, no matter what society seems to do, that is, everybody else, there seems to be just certain kinds of people are interested in so-called education. And, of course, many people have to look at the ground and go, well, I hear what you're saying, but I don't know. I think we're in need of additional stats on that. We need more research. I know you do. I mean, Jesus. 3,500 years is just, we can't go on that kind of basis. Also, just what I said with that little dramatic sarcasm, people also suspect something unsettling about what I just said is why no one will hear it. Life will not let people hear it. For me to point out that no matter what you do, or thus it seems, I'm just pointing out thus it seems. How's that for getting off the hook? That no matter what mankind does collectively, that is, what society does, that they can take children at the earliest age and play Mozart all day long and stand there over their little cribs or hold them during recess and read to them from Goethe and Erasmus and Plato and show them fine art, that no matter what they do, I know I shouldn't be rubbing this in because it's meaningless, but no matter what they do, if someone points out, there seems to be the same continuing, at least number, let's forget type. Statistically, there seems to be a certain number of those who seem interested in what they call education. I'm not defining it, just what they call education. Anything beyond the 6th grade, let's assume in this country. I keep forgetting we're here in Pakistan. All right, the 5th grade. That left to their own devices, if you take children and you do not make them go to school, that up at a certain age, there continues to be, with almost no no discernible or no meaningful variation. There is a consistent number on every part of this planet throughout history that if you left it to their own devices of what ordinary people call education, just what they call it, and you'd let children either go to school and learn just everything that you'd normally, like you've been through, what is normally taught in elementary school, secondary school, high school, college, postgraduate, just make it available and let children either take it or not take it, pursue it or not pursue it at their discretion. There continues to be, there is a specific percentage of them that will do it and not do it, no matter what preface they're given, no matter what kind of external encouragement they're given. Anything this side of making them do it, that no matter what kind of public service commission announcements the Greeks put on, no matter what the Roman Empire tried to do, handing out condoms to teenagers and encouraging them to go to graduate school, no matter what they did, offering them a lifetime supply of camels if they'll go after their masters or whatever it is. No matter what they do, if they leave it up to the kids, that is, little humans, there is a continuing percentage of those who will do it. And that civilization, that is, other people, cannot apparently affect or have any effect on this number. And people know that. No, they don't. I just said that. And some of you just almost agreed momentarily. You just almost went, well, that's true. No, it's not. Jesus. Don't wig yourselves out. If you can get past that, there is a difference. That wasn't even the point tonight, of course, but what else is new? There's a difference even at that level between education and knowledge. But we're going to go on past that, back to the opening heading into the area of knowledge itself. Now you understand knowledge, I'm including either education, lack of education, whatever degree of education you have in mind for any individual or for humans in general. There's a difference between knowledge at the level even upon which there's speculation, analyzation, and inquiry now regarding areas of proclaimed extraordinary states of consciousness. It is talked about as though almost exclusively, after giving some lip service to the fact that there must be some experience involved, that after that it is then talked about on the basis and the speculation as to what the person, the little b Buddha or Muhammad or Jesus or Moses, the person who understood, the person who actually communed with the face of God or the voice of God, the person who underwent this experience, boom, got that out of the way. Then what's after that? Then it is only speculated on, only talked about, only dreamed of on the basis of what the person knew after that. What did their writings, their reputed writings, or what did the quotes that are supposedly now remembered, what does it reveal about what they knew? Other than the fact of what else are they going to talk about? It strikes the mind, which should not come as a surprise, except people cannot keep this directly, bluntly in mind, that the mind can only consider the matter of some other state of consciousness on the basis of what's in it for me. Well, put simply, it can only conceive of, it can only have any interest, can only hear any discussion about what might be a part of some other state of consciousness on the basis of, well, what would it add to me? What would I learn from it? It is absolutely predictable. There's nothing untoward about it. And then people press on, even people who are engaged in such activity as this, as best they can. It is the bedrock of religion, even at its most publicly would-be mystical level. Even at the level of people actually trying to, as St. Thomas would have it, to imitate, or the imitation of Christ, that it was not intended, they speculated, that it was not Jesus' attempt and all the other Jesuses with little j's. There was not Jesus' intent that men only listen to what he had to say on the basis of someday it will stand them in good stead after they die. That what he was talking about was the potential to change one's inner life now that the kingdom of God, even they'll point out that even he said, hey, the kingdom of God's in you. It's not somewhere else. That this other state is in you. It's not out there. It's not in heaven. And it's not after death. If it exists, it's right now. So even at that sort of level, which is not taken to be extremely strange and weird, I mean, it's just taken as being the perhaps a bit overzealous attempt of some otherwise religious, stable, orthodox men and women throughout the history of all the different religions, of them attempting to an extraordinary degree, to implement the teachings of their religion, the teachings of their founder, as best they can interpret them. But it's still on the basis of them discussing what they're assuming, what they accept their founder to have said, some great holy person, on the basis that what's of importance to consider is what I might gain from it in the way of knowledge. Again, there's nothing wrong here, but I'm trying to make you see that there is no proper way to think about another state of consciousness. There's no improper way, but there's no proper way because you cannot do it. Moses says, I saw the face of God. He came back, and assuming that, just take the story on the surface, and he came back and he decided he'd try to tell a few people. Because anyone, it always turns out, anyone that ever engaged in this, they have already, just due to the magnetic structure of life, they already have friends and acquaintances with a similar interest. So Buddha does not come back. Buddha doesn't pop up from nowhere as an original hermit and come back and think, well, I wonder who's interested. He knows immediately who's interested. He's known them for years. So did Jesus, so did Moses. So taking a more personalized view of such stories, Moses goes up. Always interesting. Shouldn't be a big deal. They always go up. Notice they never go down. Moses goes up in the mountains, and he comes back and he tells those that he already knew would be interested that he heard the voice of God, that in his brain he experienced another state of consciousness. And they said, well, my God, what did he say? What did he do? And so then it comes out as rules and regulations that, well, this higher state of consciousness, that is God, said that we should do so and so. So, apparently, the man was privy to direct new information directly from the voice, from the center of the universe, from the creator of the universe. But it doesn't say anything about the experience of consciousness. Now, if I tried to describe that, if I just said that to a fairly reasonable person, somebody who was interested in theology or even in the philosophical aspects of theology, they might go, well, wait a minute. You just repeat the story yourself. It said that he went up there, and of course the true story, or the way it's repeated, I think, was it was a burning bush of such a degree that he couldn't look into it, so he knew it was something strange, because the bush didn't burn up and disappear. It just stayed aflame, so he knew that something extraordinary is going on. Burning bush, I'll leave it to you. Those of you who have had the experience, of course, burning bush, you think, not bad, no. At any rate, so this reasonable person responding, say I'm playing their part, remember, they would say, well, they do take the experience into account. I said that. They always do. It's like they describe Buddha awoke. Next chapter. And that's it. Because then they start talking about what he reportedly said, what he directed people should do to reach such a state, how people would be better off, how society would be better served. And it just immediately fits, because to the mind, what else could it know? It's not a trick. It is not a conspiracy of ignorance. What else can the mind conceive of as being useful? That Moses, to use that again, comes back down, and his band of monks, combine the metaphors of Buddha, Moses comes back down, and his buddies look at him, and they know immediately, you rascal. You got up there. You did it. Yeah, it happened. They say, well, what? Tell us what. The mind speaking. No offense to his buddies, no offense to anybody. That's not the point. But if they had not had the experience, their liver's not going to ask what it was. Their stomach's not going to ask. Their private part's not going to ask. Nothing having to do with simply the instinctive needs of man is going to ask Moses, God, what's that look on your face? Where have you been? A person's dual denum does not care. All it cares about is, thank God, we don't have to put up with that kind of shit. Well, that was in that news item, I think. The mind can only, it says, well, what was it? What else are you going to say to the mind? What else can the mind ask? The people's mind did not start off on the wrong track, but what else are they going to say? This could be even less clear than you feared it would be when I started, but then again, it may not. But even if it is, how about this? Thank your lucky stars because the tape's almost out. So it can't get much worse, can it? Don't challenge me on that. There is a difference between knowledge of all kinds for those that consider that they are interested truly, sincerely in such as this. In other words, they consider it to be extraordinary knowledge, metaphysical knowledge, supernatural knowledge. You can call it anything you want to. I'm not going to complain with that. That ordinary minds, sane minds, reasonable minds of people who consider that they are seriously interested in such as this, they still, having no recourse, having nowhere else to hold on to, the mind having nothing else to even speculate upon, wants to know, what is the secret knowledge? What is it I'm lacking? Here's the thing. After you once understand that there's nothing unusual about that, there's no mistake, you can't avoid it. Everyone starts on that basis. But as long as you continue on that basis, you will, perforce, continue to operate on the basis that part of what's holding me back from the knowledge is the kind of ignorance, the kind of one-sided knowledge, the kind of prejudices, the kinds of dicta that I have in my thinking now. Just useless crap that the mind just assumes the experience is some kind of direct, there's even been descriptions of it, a direct seeing into the knowledge of life. Well, that's the secret, that you're just able, you suddenly see life and you see, it's like it's written out, here's what you've been looking for. To the mind, that's the only thing that makes any sense. But as long as that's the only basis upon which you operate, regardless of what you may say to the contrary, you still operate on the basis that even though just correcting your thinking, just fine-tuning it is not necessarily going to make you suddenly become enlightened, but you still operate on the basis, well, I've got to do something. I mean, you can't sit here on the train even trying your best with your little feet through the holes in the floorboard trying to help the train along. Still, there is some distance from Paris to Istanbul. That there's, I got to do something. And so since obviously the experience takes place in the brain, even though it affects everything, but it takes place in the brain, that is in my thinking. So at least if I cannot think, if I do not know the kinds of thoughts, if I do not have the knowledge that is indigenous to the awakening, at least I know that some of the garbage in my mind now has got to be anathema to enlightenment. It has got to be absolutely opposed to any greater awakening of consciousness. So therefore, at least while I'm traveling along, I can quit doing crossword puzzles and playing pocket pool. I can start trying to do something with my improper thinking now. And as always, by God, it fits. Fits like a cheap new suit. It's just, what are you going to say? What are you going to tell the mind? Or what would I tell somebody's mind? Oh, no, don't do that. They go, have you got any idea of the garbage that goes through my mind, all the repetition, the wasted stuff? I might as well work on it. I mean, unless you can give me a pill to suddenly enlighten me. Just, if you can't do that, are you going to tell me that I shouldn't do anything about trying to straighten out my thinking? And you cannot stand there to a young puppy like that and go, no, you shouldn't. It's not that you shouldn't do it. It's just, how shall I put that? You shouldn't have any faith in it. You shouldn't take it seriously. You end up propping it up. For the last 2 nights that we taped, there have been a couple of little short news items that one of them said that only unfinished products have the energy, I'll combine them, or interest to preach or to be preached to. Anytime you see a preacher and those desirous of being preached to, you have a situation of the unfinished hectoring the incomplete. Now forget the externals, and internally, anytime you're correcting your thinking and you go, well, by God, it needs it. You've got an unfinished product preaching to an incomplete congregation. And as long as you engage in that and you take it to be worthwhile, it does seem like, well, by God, I'm accomplishing something. I mean, Lord knows I'm not awake, and I'm surely not, well, I'm not as enlightened as Buddha, I admit that, but by golly, I got to do something. And at least I can straighten out some of this garbage in my mind. Because God knows it's full of garbage. And so therefore, what are you going to say? Because you think, well, at least between here and hopefully my moment of awakening, at least between here and there, I can at least try to clean up my act. Curtain time, yeah, I know. If you take it seriously that you're going to change your thinking, then I got to tell you, you believe that if you went back to school, you'd know more. Who in the world could face up? Who can understand that you knew at the ordinary level all you were ever going to know when you were, whatever age you talked? I hate to be insulting, but how about 18 months to try to make everybody feel at least reasonably decent? Who is going to face up? That's in serious quotation marks, of course, face up. But who can face up? Who can realize that at that age you knew everything at the ordinary level that you would ever know? Some people can. Then you realize sort of what a pathetic, silent laugh or joke it is to hear people whine and complain about their psychological problems, or to hear them complain about anything, about the continuing adverse circumstances of life. None of it's a surprise. They already knew all that. They knew all that at the age of 18 months. They have been coasting. And everybody says, oh, no, I haven't. You don't know all my problems. Well, sure I do. Everybody knows all your problems. You know everybody else's problems. And you think, well, yeah, but they mostly just make them up. It's just, they're not as bad. The reason that works, and the reason that you laugh, and the reason that there's such thing as sarcasm, cynicism, the ability to ridicule one another, is just what I've told you. That the fact is, by the age of 18 months, everybody knew everything they knew already. After that, you, in a sense, your nervous system, your mind laid down, and it's been coasting. You've been going down like a big water slide on your back. And it's kind of boring. I mean, life has its own needs, and so people keep going, whining about how hard they have it. Now I assume that you do see the connection between, or the distinction between, the experience and knowledge. Well, you're going to have to, because the tape's run out.